So let me start the recording now. I think it is okay like this. So last time we designed this page where we have a simple page there which have the contents and the image by the side. What we said, what do we want to do? What we want to do is that anytime this button is clicked, just like the Figma site, we want to pop out a model. And from the code here, I can see that we've worked on this, the model too. The only thing that we just need to do is to add a JavaScript there. And I can see here we've designed the classes that we need. Currently, it's having this class close. And removing this class close, going back to the page, as you can see, we have this modal popping out. But we don't want this modal to pop out like this. The only time it will pop out is when we click on this get started for free. And again, to this close icon here, when you click on it, it should be able to close this modal. And what are we trying to do here? We are trying to use the knowledge of positioning in CSS there, because without the help of CSS now, that's when we can place this content on top of the other one there. Because if you look at the design here, from the HTML side, we have this main element, which is everything that is at the back of the modal. And down here, we now have this div, which is having this particular class modal here, along with the content that we want to place inside it, like the form and the controls that we want to have there. And this modal now, from the CSS, I can see it already that if you add this class modal on the element, then everything is going to show by default with the position of fixed, which means you can't move this element around. It will always stay wherever we position it to. And where did we position it to? We make sure that the thing cover up the entire screen by using this insert. We'll give it this background along with this alpha channel so that we can see the other content at the back of it. We display it as flex, align it to center, justify the content to center so that our form can be, or whatever content that is inside that modal can be at the center, just like what is going on or what you are seeing currently on the screen. And we want this element to always be positioned on top of the other element. That's the reason why we are using this C index, and we are using this random text 99 or this value 9999 just to specify that okay, this thing, we want it to always be at the top of other content, because almost all the other content on the page, none of them is having a Z index up to 9. Talk less of this 999999, which is really big. So which means this our modal will always be on top of any content that we have on a page. And again, we have this other class, which is this close, because this class here is very important. That's what we're going to be doing later on, or that's what we're going to be adding to this div, or remove it on the div, depending on whether the user want to see the modal or not. So by default, this thing is going to have the close class on it, and once it's closed, as you can see, we are not going to see the modal again, because anytime there's a class close on this modal, where we want the display to be none. And once the element is displayed none, that means you are not going to see anything on the screen. And once this class is removed, then the modal will pop up. And that's what this button is going to do later on. The job of this button is to remove that class close. And once the class is removed, then we are going to see the modal. Again, too, there's a close button at the top right there. Once we click on it, then it will add the class back on the element there. And in order for us to be able to achieve this, what we need to do is to target all our elements inside the JavaScript file. So before you start manipulating anything on the screen there, you need to know which element you want to manipulate something on the page, and what are the elements that you want to manipulate. So you need to firstly select them down. It's not enough that you select all of them on at the top, but by convention there, you should always put all this your element at the top, except if the one that you need to select somewhere else. For most of them, you always put it at the top, so that when you are reading your code, you already know all the elements that you are going to be manipulating, or whatever element that you want to touch on the page. And what are the elements that we want to add interaction to here? We want to add it on this button, we want to add it on the modal R2. And what are the stuff that we need to do now? We need to select this element from the JavaScript. And we've talked about different ways of targeting your element. For example, here, I'm going to call this one get started. So I'm calling it get started button, which is this button here. So I want to target it. And this button here, I'm using this query selector to select the button. But I don't just want to mention button like that. Because what if you later have some button later on the screen? So I don't want this thing to be like that. So this stuff here, I'm going to give it a class. And the class is going to be this get started. So with this now, I know that this is only the element I'll always be targeting on the screen, because the current selector I'm using right now, if there's a button before this one later on, it will not target this button again. But if I'm using this particular class and I know that this is the only element that will have the class, then I know that it will always target the element. So instead of us targeting the button directly like this, we can use that get started. So this one now is going to target this our button here. And what do we want to do with the button? What we want to do is that anytime this button is clicked, we want the modal to open. So the modal that we want to open, and we don't have access to it in JavaScript yet, so we need to target that one too. So here we're going to have the modal container like this. So modal, I'm calling it modal container. You can call it anything you want. So this document, then query. So we have the query selector. And what did I want to target? I want to target the element that have class modal here. So any element that have that class modal, that's going to be my modal container, because I know on the page inside our HTML, this modal class will always be available on the element. This is the only one that will be changing there, but I know that this modal will always be available, and that's the reason why I'm using it in the JavaScript to target that div element. So we have two things right now. We have the button that we need to click on to see the modal, and we have the modal itself that we want to show. But when is it going to show? The time it's going to show is when we click on the button. So which means here now we need to add event. So we need to add event, or we need to listen for the event on this element. And which event do we want to listen for? We want to listen for click event. So anytime the user click on this button, we want our modal to pop out if it is not there. And what do we need to do? Then here now we need to call this our get started btn, then add event listener. So what type of event do you want to add? I want to add a click. And once this element is click, what do you want to do is whatever the function that you pass here. And as you can see right now, I'm passing arrow function, which is something that we've talked about. So you forgot about this thing, just go back to all the previous video that talked about function. You'll see everything back there, so I won't be going back again. So we have this event listener, which is what we are adding to this button. And what are we doing here? We are talking to this button that anytime someone perform this event on you, so everything that is inside this stuff here, that's what we want to do. For example here, what do I want to do? I just want to console log at Abdul Rakib here. So anytime the user click on this button, it will always print out this Abdul Rakib. But you're not going to see it when you go to the page. The only time it will happen is when the event occur on the element. So the only time it will bring it out, as you can see right now, nothing is coming out inside the log there. So in order for this thing to work, we need to trigger the event. And what is the event we need to trigger is a click. So which means on this element, we just need to click it. And once it is clicked, as you can see, it's going to fire the event. And once the event is fired, since we are listening for it here, then it's going to do everything that we have inside this our function. But this is not what we want to do. So we don't want to keep console log like this. What we want to do is that we want to bring out our modal. And when is your modal going to come outside? Because those are the things you need to, don't just jump into coding. You need to know what you want to do first. Then based on what you want to do, then you write the code that is going to bring whatever you are expecting on the screen there. What we want to do here is that we want to click on this button. And once the button is clicked, it will open this modal. So we've started with the first flow, which is users should be able to click on this button. And once they click on it, we want to do something. And that's what we are doing on this line. But what do we want to do? We want to open modal. Which modal do we want to open? We want to show this in. And you know that the only time this thing is going to come outside is when this class is not present on it. So the only time this stuff is going to show on the screen is when this class is not present. So what do we need to do from JavaScript like that? It means we need to remove this class. So that's what the button is supposed to do on this element. But how do we get to that element and remove the class? We've talked about all these things. Mention the element, and on that element we have the class list. So this class list now come with some functionality that you can use to work with the element classes. So here now, this class list now, it has some methods that we can use, like this add, if you want to add a class, contain to check whether there's a class there, or remove, which is what we need right now to remove a particular class that is here, or toggle, which is something I've explained to, which do the work of add or remove depending on whether that thing is there or not. But right now, the one I need is remove, because I want to remove a particular class. And what class do we want to remove on the element? So the class we want to remove here is the close, because that's the only time this modal is going to show when that class is not available. So here now, we just need to pass the class, save it, then go back to the page, and once we try it again, you'll see that by the time this thing is clicked on, then our modal is going to show on the screen, because that class has been removed, which is the close. And once the class is removed, the next thing we have there is this thing is going to pop out based on our CSS. It all depends on how you do your HTML and the CSS, or what you are using to trigger the modal to open. Right now, we're only using class, which is this close. So when the close, by default, the close is there, so which means we are not going to see it. And when you now click on the button, we want to remove that class, and that's what we are doing here. So we targeted the button, we select our modal container too, and we add event to the button. So anytime the button is clicked, then carry out this action, which means on this modal, the class that is here, go there and remove anything like close if it is there. If it is not there, you know that it will not do anything, because the only time it will work is when that class is there. And once the class is removed, you see our modal is going to pop out like this. But apart from what we just did here too, we should be able to close the modal by clicking on this close, or where we submit the form. So how do we close the modal? So the same thing too, we can do it with this button. Select the button and add event list now. What event? Click. And anytime it is clicked, what do we want to do? We want to close the modal. And you know that the only time the modal will close is when there is this class, particular class here. So which means here that we're removing the stuff, we need to do the opposite when that close button is clicked. So instead of removing, we are going to add. But right now, we don't have access to the button that we want to use to close. And if you look at it here, it has this particular class on it, which is this btn close. So we can use that to target the element inside the JavaScript. So here I'm going to have a close modal button like this, which is going to be the document, then query selector, and inside this place we pass our selector that we want to use. Again too, here is the same thing, just target this your button, and then add events that you want to listen for. So which event you want to listen for? Click. But anytime this button is clicked, what do you want to do again? So the modal container, so the class list. So instead of removing now, we need to add the class, because if the class is not added, there's no way the modal will close. So we need to add a class. And which class do we want to add? We want to add this class close. So when the get started is clicked, that one will remove the class. And when the close modal button is clicked, that one will add the class, which give us the functionality of adding or removing the modal. Or you can use this get started to open the modal, and you can use this close to close the modal. So anytime this button is clicked, it will remove the class close on the modal. And anytime this element is clicked, then it's going to add a class close, which is something that is going on in the HTML that you can see from here. So if you look at it currently now, this class close, so let me expand it. So if you look at it currently now, this div with the class modal is having close, and that's the reason why our modal is not showing. But once you click on this button, what we to do is that it will come to this element and it will remove the class, which is that close. And once this thing is clicked now, you see that the class close has been removed, and that's the reason we are seeing our modal. But now if you click on this button, then that one will return the class back. And once the class is there, you know that the CSS is going to use the display of none for the modal, and that's the reason why the stuff is not showing on the screen there like that. So the major work is on your HTML and CSS. JavaScript just comes in to add a sprinkle of interaction to your element, because this button doesn't know what to do before. But with the help of JavaScript, we're able to talk to it that once it is clicked, go to this element and remove the class close that is on it. And the same thing here too, once you click on this one, then it's going to add the class back, so that we can remove the modal from screen there, because that's what the CSS is all about. When it adds class close, you don't see it, but if it doesn't have that class close, then it's going to show based on what we have there. So anytime that is close on this particular class here, then the display is going to be done. But if it is not there, then this is what it's going to do by default, which is going to show on the screen. It all depends on how you wired your CSS. People will do it in the other way, that is only when you have the class open that is going to show, but I'm doing it in a different way. And that's the beauty of this thing, that you know the concept, not just how someone is solving the problem alone. So once you know the concept, you can do this thing anyway you want this thing there like that. So this thing is giving us a way of adding, JavaScript is giving us a way of adding interaction to our element, because without JavaScript we can't add the interaction that we just did right now. So the other thing that I said we are going to be adding on this stuff is to fill in the form. And once this form is filled, we should be able to get the data that the user filled. And if that data is available, we need to display it somewhere here on the screen. But we don't have that view yet, so which is something that is going to be coming in from JavaScript there. Because whatever the details that the user fill here, we want to be able to see it somewhere here on the page. And how do we do that? So the first thing you need to know is that anytime you submit your form, that's an event that is going to fire. But right now, it's doing its work by using normal HTML form submission. Because anytime you click on submit in your form, it will just submit the form to wherever you specified as action. And as you can see right now, the action is empty. So once it's empty, you know that it will use the current page, and that's what it's doing. So whatever you do or whatever you put inside this your form is going to submit it back to the current page that you are working on. For example, here now, this is just a sample email like this, which is not correct, and the name is going to be this Abdul Rakib like this. So if this thing is submitted, once this thing is submitted, as you can see in the URL, it's going to send everything there. But this is not what we want. We don't want the browser to handle the form for us. We want to be the one that is going to handle the form. And how do you do that? You need to use JavaScript. So the same way that we use JavaScript to add interaction to all these elements here, we can listen for the events of form submission, because anything that is going on the page, we always fire the event, but we have different type of events that you can listen for. So for the button, most of the time the event you listen for is click. But when you are dealing with form, the event you listen for is different, because it's going to fire another type of event that you are looking for there anytime the form is submitted. So anytime you submit your form, it's going to fire the submit event, and you can now listen for that event and prevent the browser from handling the normal flow that used to happen when you are dealing with form. Because anytime you submit the form, if you are using the get by default, the method get is just going to append whatever you type in your form into the URL. That one, if you give it a name, the reason why it's adding it there is because we already specified the name. And whatever name that you use on this your controls, that's what is going to use to put it in the URL there. So if I submit this in again, you see that it send this email is whatever the email we type, while the full name is what we have in the full name. So how does it know about all this information? Is because of what we are using here. So the name we are using for the controls is what is going to use to submit it in the URL. So whatever you type in this box, it will submit it through this name. Whatever you type in this box, it will submit it through this name. If you don't put the name, it will not submit it in the URL at all when we are using the method of get on our form. But we don't want it to do it like that. Anytime this form is submitted, we want to process everything and just display it on this screen here using JavaScript instead of using the normal flow that the browser used to do anytime a form is submitted, because it's going to reload your page and you don't want this thing to reload your page. You still want to stay there, but you want to get the information that the user submitted from the form and use it wherever you want to use it. And where do we want to use it? Where we want to use it is just going to be somewhere, or we can open another model later on, but for now I won't do that there. But what we can do here is just to display the information somewhere on the screen there. And which means here on our page, we need to design the page, or we need to design the elements where we want to display the content. But before we get there, let's see how we can interact with our form, how we can hijack the form submission from the form or from the browser there, and we can process anything we need from your input. Because sometimes too, when the user wants to submit their form, as you can see right now, I did not put anything in the email or in the full name. If I submit this in now, it will still work. But we don't want something like that. We don't want the user to submit until the form is filled correctly. You can do it too with using normal HTML by putting some validation there. For example, here, if you want the user to type something inside that box, we can use this required here. So required is what to use anytime you want user to type something in a box. But this thing doesn't care whether what they type is right or wrong. It doesn't care. As long as the user types something there, it's going to work. But what if you want them to type the data in a special way, or in a particular way, or using a particular pattern? For example, here now, their full name, we always want it to be something like this, full and name. So we want to have their first name or something like this, first name like this. So we want to have first name, then space, and want to have last name. So this thing here now doesn't care whether you type it like this or you just type only one like this. It will still work, because the browser is only looking for the text. The only thing it's looking for is that the user must type. So if I submit now, as you can see, it's going to tell them to type something. But it doesn't care whether whatever they type is okay or if not okay there like that. So let me just type a correct email here. So if I submit, as you can see now, it's telling me to type something like to fill in. But if I put space and press enter, as you can see, it accepts the stuff. Even and you know that doesn't make sense. Like you are filling your username and you are now putting space as a full name. So we should be able to check whatever the user is typing from JavaScript, and if there's any error, we should be able to show the message to them that something is going on. You need to complete this stuff first before we can process your form. Because if you go to any site online, there's no way they will asking you for something, or they will asking you to type and you are not typing something there and it will work. No, this thing will not work. It will ask you to fill in the form. For example, now if I go to this registration page for this site, to register with phone number, and as you can see, these are the forms you need to fill before you can proceed there. But if you look at their button itself, as you can see, the button is disabled. The only time the button will show is when you fill in all this information. And when you don't fill any of this information, can you see what to come outside? After you enter and you leave, you see that it brought out this message there. If I go to this first name too and leave without typing anything, as you can see that it's showing the error here too, and the color change that I've not filled this information. But now if I fill something there, as you can see now, the color is now something else like that. And this is how you are going to work, because you don't want the user to just keep submitting anything anyhow on the page like that. So you should be able to process the form that the user wants to work on. But right now, the form is just normal HTML form. So in order for you to be able to see what the user type in the form, and that you want to process them, or you want to check whether they are valid or not before you process the form, you can listen for an event on your form, and that event is known as a submit. So we can listen for submit event on our form. And what do we need to do first? So the first thing we need to do is to select our form. So here, what I'm going to do is going to contact form like this is going to be document, query selector. What are we looking for? We are looking for form. So anytime this form is submitted, we want to hijack it and do some stuff with JavaScript. So how do you hijack? You need to listen for the submit event. So add event listener, to add event listener. What event do you want to listen for? We want to listen for submit. So this is one of the events that you can listen for on your form. And this one will get fired, or you're going to say the whatever stuff you want there anytime you submit that your form. So what do we want to do when this form is fired? So we want to receive the events that occur, which I'm going to console log out. But this event too come with some goodies that we can use, because I mentioned it now that we don't want the browser to process this form for us. We want to be the one that is going to process it. So how do you talk to the browser that the way you used to work, anytime this event is fired, we don't want you to do it again? So by default, anytime the event is fired, anytime your form is submitted, it's going to fire the submit event. And once that event is fired, what do you see there? You see that it will submit it in the URL. But that's not what we want. We don't want it to submit the form for us. What we want to do is to hijack it. And what do I mean by hijack? Whatever the browser used to do with that event before is not going to do it again. So how do you hijack the functionality that the browser used to do with that event? So here, on this event that you are getting from here, from a JavaScript, you can use something known as a prevent default. So this prevent default, what you are saying here is that, all right, browser, so stop doing whatever you used to do anytime this event occur. So anytime this event occur, whatever you used to do before, stop it, don't do it again. And what this line is going to do is that anytime we now submit the form now, once you submit, you will not see that the page will not reload, and this thing will not close, because we've prevented the way the browser will work by default. So this one is used, just like the name, is used to prevent whatever the browser is going to do anytime this event occur there. So anytime this submit event occur, what the browser will do by default is to submit it to the browser there by changing the URL. But we don't want that. We want to process the form by ourselves by getting the name, getting the email, and the name that the user type are there. So this line, you always use it anytime you don't want the browser to do the normal action that used to occur on the page anytime the particular event that you are listening for happen there. So this is one of the stuff, the functionality that we're going to be using on this event. One stuff that we've talked about there too is the target. So where you can get the element that triggered the event, but on the form, it doesn't work like that. So the ev.target is actually the form. So this one will give you the form itself. But if you want to know which element that you actually click that trigger the form, so that's another stuff that we can do here, which is known as ev.submitter here. So this submitter is which button did you click on that submit the form, while the target is the actual form that submitted this form, which we know that it is this contact form, because that's what we had event on already there like that. So now save the code and go back to the page. Now we've hijacked the functionality that the browser is going to do anytime you click on this stuff. So look at it right now. I fill in the details, and once I click on submit now, as you can see, it's not submitting the form again. But if you check the console, can you see that we are getting the element and the form that triggered all these things? So event or ev that I have here is just event, is a variable. You can name it anything you want. I'm calling it ev right now. Later on, if I want, I can call it e, or I can even write it in full. We talked about all this in functions, so I don't need to be going into all those ones. So whatever you pass into your function is just a name that will be representing what you'll be getting later on. So you can call it anything you want. And what are we doing here? We're using this prevent default to prevent whatever the browser will do with this submit event. And what the browser will do by default is that it will process your form. And since we've stored this in, you see that it's not processing our form again. Now it's not left for us to do whatever we want to do with the data that we have on the form. So it's left with us to do whatever we want on the form there like that. So this thing is very important, because anytime you are dealing with form and you need to process the stuff yourself without relying on the browser, then you need to stop, or you need to prevent the default action that the browser you will do by default anytime the form is submitted there. So what do we want to do here? What we want to do is to get the information from this event. So let me console log out the event directly so that you can see what is there. I don't even need to console log out all this one because they are coming from the event, and from that place we can get what we need. So what do we want to do? We want to get the information that the user typed in the box. How do you get the information? These events have everything that you need. Once you are dealing with form, whatever the controls that you have under your form, they are going to be part of the event that occur there. And as you can see, the type of event we are getting now is submit event. And under the submit event, we are going to have all the information that we need under the target. And as you can see here, under this form, can you see, we have access to the input of that email. We have access to the input for this, their full name, and we have access to the button that they use to submit it. So in order for you to have access to the value inside this one, as you can see, we need to use this index 0 on the target, which is the form. So in order for us to have access to the data that is here, we need to use index 1, which is array that we've talked about already. So here, what we can do is that we can have access to the email that the user typed through this our event, then the target. On this target, we are going to use index 0. Then from there, there's a value there. So for us to get the full name too, so on this event, there's a target, which is a form. But instead of you using this like this, don't forget it's the same thing as this contact form. So this event or target is the same thing as this contact form. So whether I use it like this or I do it like this, we are still going to get the same stuff like that. So this one is going to give us the second one, then the value. And from there, we can console log out the value so that we see what we are getting back. So the email and the full name like this. So go back to the screen and input the details again. You say that whatever the user fill on this page, then we are going to have access to them. Can you see now? So from JavaScript, I have access to what the user fill for the email and what they fill for this full name. How do you do that? To have access to what the details fill, the same way that you arrange your HTML on this page, that's the same way you are going to have access to them from JavaScript. So this is the first one. So that means we are going to add this one as index 0. Don't forget, when you're dealing with array, we don't count from 1. We start counting from 0. So here it's 1. But when you're accessing it from JavaScript, it's going to be index 0. So this one is the second one. Then from JavaScript, it's going to be index 1 and so forth like that. So this is the first one, index 0 in JavaScript on the form. This is the second one, is going to be index 1 or in JavaScript on the form. And that's what we are doing here on this line 33 and 34. What I'm doing here is that on the event too, there's a target, and I mentioned it that the target is the form that you add the event on, and then on that form we are taking the first element that is there because we are using index 0. And what is the first element? It is this input. So this is the first control that is there like that. Then on this line again, we are creating a variable full name, and we are getting the details from this second control that is inside it. And what is the second control there? As you can see, it is this input. So this input is what we are going to be saving inside this full name. But not just that input, we are taking the value that the user type. So to get the value that the user type on your input, you are going to use the dot, then followed by the value. I don't need to be talking about what is dot here because we've talked about all these things. That's this one we talked about object, array, and so forth like that before we start manipulating the content on the page. So this one on the target, which is the form, there is one control inside you, the first control that is inside you. So the value that is there, then save it inside this variable that we're creating here. So again too, I'm creating another variable known as full name, then which is the same contact form. I mentioned that this contact form is the same thing as ev.target here because they are referring to the same thing. This is the form because if you look at where we are targeting it, it's just the form. So whatever you are getting from this event, target there is that same form that you attach the event on. So whether you do it like this on line 33 or like this, we are going to get the same thing added. So I can use this form directly like this without using the ev.target or event.target. It will still work. But I'm showing you different ways of having access to the form that you are interacting with when the form is submitted here. So you always get it on the event or target, or if you have access to the name of that form directly, you can just do whatever you want with it too. So any one of them will work. And after getting all this value, what do? We put them in this particular variable and we are printing it out on the screen. And that's the reason why we are getting this data so that the user type. Then based on this now, you can now add validation into this your content there, just like this side. If I come here now and started typing something they are not expecting there, you see that this thing will not work like that because I'm not typing the code. Can you see now? Can you see what is come aside? I typed inside this stuff. What did you see the message? Invalid phone number. Please enter the correct phone number. How did they know that I'm not typing phone number? It's still the same thing that we are trying to do here. So anytime the user submit or anytime they leave this input, you can actually check what they type here, which is what we are getting here. As you can see, the details that the user type inside this box, we have access to it in our JavaScript. The one that they type inside this box, we have access to it inside the JavaScript. So it's not less for you now to check the value, whether it follow what you are expecting or not, there like that. So here now, this thing is expecting number from us, but now I'm typing this nonsense, and that's why it brings out this error stuff that I'm going to explain it in our next class how you can add this kind of a validation into your form, because that's where we're going to continue from. Like talk about some stuff that you need to know first before you start adding all this validation, because we need to be able to add some kind of a validation using regular expression or using some simple stuff too later, or simple checking, which I'm going to be talking about in the next class because I have another class soon. It's even 9 already. So yeah, we should now be able to process the form that the user have here. So once you submit your form, you see that you have access to the details, and that details that you can now check whether it is okay or not. If it's not okay, what do we need to do? We need to change the line of the box to red, or if you don't want to change it to red, just show the error message under the box there that okay, oh, what you are doing here, we don't know. You need to come and update the details and so forth like that. So those are the things you can do with your form, and we're going to be talking about that in the next class, how you can process your form. We've started with it here in this class, the basic one, which is by adding event listener to our form, and on the form we have access to all the value that we have inside it, all the controls that is inside it. We take all the value. So the next thing we need to do now is to process them and check whatever the user is typing, whether it is okay for that feed or not. If it is okay, then we do what we are supposed to do. But if it is not okay, then we output error out for them that okay, what you are doing here is not what we are expecting, and we're going to display the same error just like the way Gigi is doing it on this their site here like that. So they have this inbox, or they have this box for the email, and anytime you type everything is not there, then it's not going to show at all like that. Oh, this guy has messaged me. So this is where I'll be stopping, and I will continue from there in the next class. So stop